So it doesn't matter if you're doing waste yarn or whatever. That's a tip I'll share with you. I always do that because then that way it's muscle memory. And muscle memory is probably your greatest friend in doing this. So I've raised up the needles on the back half of the machine. The way I anchor this and to the heel to the body of the sock is I come across here and I literally wrap the needle behind wrap the yarn behind the first needle on the back half of the machine.
Yeah. Hold on. Sorry. Hold on.
Nope, that's fine. We got another one we can do the exact same thing on. Yes.
When you say are you just going behind the needle?
I'm going behind the needle. No, just behind it.
Okay.
Because that's how you're anchoring, at this point, that's how you're anchoring the heel to the body of the sock. This first wrap will tie it into the body of the sock. And then, of course, and most heels, when you do them, it's just one up all the way, as you do your decreases and increases. And I have to engage my heel spring, because otherwise we won't need anything. And so this first time, there'll be 2 needles that are wrapped in that same yarn. But you just take the yarn and you just put it behind that first needle in the back half of the machine. And later on, when this last stitches get knit on the increase, that'll all go away. I know it looks funny right now. And let's see, am I trying to mess it up? I'm trying to mess it up. And I did mess it up, but that's okay. I can fix that. And if you do what I just did, which happens, I didn't knit this one. I didn't raise this one, but I can unknit it and fix that. Or we can pretend I did it right and just raise it up for giggles. So, which is what we'll do. But normally I wouldn't do that, ha ha ha. But we're all human. So now it's just, hey, stuff happens. So it's literally, it's just the way it is.
So your first pass on your decrease on each side is raising 2 needles?
No.
Instead of raising 1?
No, it's raising 1 needle.
Just 1? Okay.
But what I do is I put the yarn behind the first needle on the back half of the machine.
That's already raised? That's
already raised, yes. And so then it's just, you raise one and you wrap. And I do my weights differently than everybody else does. I use soft weights exclusively. And so the rest of this is just your normal, raise one until you get to your target needle. The trick on this, on doing a wrapped heel, is your transition from your increase to your decrease. But muscle memory. And you'll notice I really watch those corners real closely when I do this. And I kind of push my fabric down. And I've done several rows. I could do the whole decrease this way without ever even adding the weights. I actually add them later. Because I just find for me this is easier. This is faster. So you don't have to use weights, but you do have to use hand pressure or something to keep it down. And I kind of break a lot of the rules when it comes to heels and toes, because when I put my heel forks in here in just a minute, I break all the rules. Because I shove them way up there, as far up there as I can, and they're as close together as I can almost get them. But for me, it works. And that's the important thing, is if you're new to these machines, you find what works well for you. Okay? Because there's not just one way to do it. Now, there are some significant things that do matter. That if you don't do them in certain areas, and if this happens, which it did for me, and then I drop my pick, Amy.
Hold on.
My last one here didn't knit.
Are you going to do a rounded heel?
No, I'm just going to do a normal wrapped heel. There's nothing rounded about it. It's just a normal heel. And I don't want that. Okay. And then I just did that. And you'll notice I kind of covered that, so put that back in. Okay. And I use soft weights exclusively for heel weights and for you'll notice if you look down here at the bottom, you can come around and look later, but I just have a cast on bonnet and I have another weight just like this inside the bonnet. And so I just take this and I give it a squeeze and I run it up and I get as close to the top as I can and I pull it through and I let it sit. I'll have to move my heel forks one time after this, and that's all I have to move them the entire time. I don't have to, I'm not, for me, less fiddly is better in that regard. It's easier for me. So my needle's up. I put my weight in. I still watch my corners because that first stitch is always where it's going to want to do something funny or weird. So I'm headed for my target needles. And so it's always just, you know, one up on your decrease. So it's pretty simple. And it goes pretty quickly because it's this part of it goes pretty quickly because you're not doing a lot of extra goodies. Okay, so now here I have, this is the last decrease. All I have to do is raise this needle here, and so I'm done with my decreases. Now this is where on a wrapped heel or any type of heel, this is where it, if you're doing a wrapped heel, this is where it matters. Instead of putting two down at the end, I put one down. So this is my transition spot. When I'm over here around 9 o'clock after I've finished my decrease, but before I do my increases, I put that first needle down, not quite all the way, just like you do everywhere else for everything else. And then I watch it and I come around, and that's my transition row. And so now I wrap the yarn on the working side and push one needle down. And so it's wrap and down. And I'm going to wrap this one and push this one down. This is when I move my heel forks for the last time because I won't need to do it again. Put my pick back in my hand, get it ready, and we are off to the races because now we're pretty much done with that. So your transition row, you know, that first on your increase is where it matters most. So you just wrap and down. And I talk my way literally through every step that I do, even though I've been pregnant on these machines for several years and I still go wrap and down. Now something happens and the phone rings and I come back and I don't know where I am or how to tell where I'm at. There's a couple of quick things. First of all, where's my working yarn? Well, my working yarn is over here already. Okay. Is it wrapped already? Yes. Okay, good. So that tells me if it's wrapped already that I'm probably going back the other way. But before I do that, I need to check and make sure that that needle's down. And so it's the same. And if you haven't heard this before, whatever you do on the right, you do on the left. And if you start at 3 o'clock, you're an equal row on, and because it's really two rows to do equal needles. And I know that sounds kind of dumb, but I don't know how else to describe it because two rows, two, you know, one this way and one that way is a complete decrease of equal value. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions? Oh, you guys are brilliant. I love you. Yay! I don't always have brilliant people. And if anybody ever needs to talk, chat, visit, or do anything, you can reach me by phone. You can reach me on Facebook Messenger, on Zoom, and in a few other ways, email. But if you are struggling with your machine or you're having an issue, so it's wrap and down. I'm available anytime. I retired a couple of years ago. So I get to sit at home and play with yarn and fiber and fabric all day. I have a wonderful life. And so, and these are things that work for me that I think are important. So I talk my way through it, and I make mistakes. You saw I made mistakes. It's okay. but we're still going to end up with a pretty heel. Even if you mess up one stitch on a heel, you can usually recover from that okay. It's usually all right. But once you get to this part and you're just doing your decreases, you don't have to fool with your weights too much. You just always make sure that your latches catch and that that first stitch knits. And this one did not knit. I didn't drop the stitch, and I hate dropping them on the miter. So I wrap, and I'm down. And if you want to catch and count and make sure, hey, where am I? Which side am I doing? Have I done it right? So at this point, I wrap. So I want to count and make sure I'm right. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 needles on this side, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I'm even, Steven, before I do anything over here and push anything down, I know that I haven't missed any stitches. But don't count on the right. Only count on the left. If you start on the right, don't count what the working yarn's on the right. Finish out the row. Finish out the set so you make sure that that's where your needle count is even. Does that help? Does anybody have questions about that? Okay. It took me a long time to figure that out. I had never seen a sock machine when mine arrived at the house. And so everything I've learned about these things are watched from some YouTube videos and from playing with the machine and going, oh, hey, ding, ding, ding. And so I like to share those things with people because, it's those little things, especially because I couldn't hand knit when I got my sock machine. I had knitted on some looms, and I don't mean the plastic looms from Walmart. I mean nice ones, nice wooden and metal ones. Now, see, I'm trying to drop a stitch here. But that's one of the things you notice. I caught that before it even had a chance to get away from me. The reason is because I'm not looking here. I'm looking back here because that's where your needles will drop. And so these are all little things. Since this crank-in is about back to basics and homecoming, and so if you're teaching somebody, just try to remember what it was like when you were learning. And even especially if you were a hand knitter up front, and then you get one of these machines and you're like, oh man, all that hand knitting knowledge translates in so many ways. Well, I couldn't do either. So I can't read a pattern. I can't write a pattern. I can make anything. I can come up with it. I can design it, and I can figure it out, and I can make it, and then I can tell you how to make it, but I can't write you a pattern.
You're my kind of person.
Well, and so I literally don't know, okay, some of the letters and some of the this, yeah, sure, I get that. But I look at it and but I want to do this, or I want it to be that. Um, you know, I decided I was going to make some placemats on my bumblebee with striped yarn, with patterned yarn. Well, when you do that, you make the little tubes because I want them to be thicker. I had to make 2 tubes, close off the ends, and match up the patterns. Otherwise, it was going to look stupid on my table. And I'm not having stupid on my table, But y'all, but you're the ones that laugh, no, because you're the same. And so I got down to my last placemat, and I had knitted. I'd taken the time and I'd matched everything up. The yarn when I started, and it was a nice patterned opal yarn, and so it was really pretty. And I get down, and it turns out that there's a flaw in the die in the very last tube that I make. Now, fortunately, I bought one of those 1,000, gram cones, so I had a full kg of yarn. So I was like, "Yay me!" And so I had 275 rows of beautiful opal yarn on a bumblebee with a 90 slot cylinder. And okay, so so I was like, "Well, what am I going to do with this thing? I don't know what I'm going to do with it." And so I looked at it and I played with it, and I looked at it and I played with it, and then I folded it in half, and I don't know what, I'm just like, oh wait, oh. And so I took the 2 ends that I had done a nice little crochet bind off on the ends without adding extra yarn, and I sewed those together by hand, and I did a mattress stitch up the side, and that's how I ended up with pot holders. So, if you come across something and it doesn't quite work out right, don't get discouraged. Look at it and say, okay, what can I do with this? So we're going to wrap and down. So now we're coming back around and we're doing the last stitch on the decrease on at 3 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is that knits that first kind of double around the 2 needles, that first one from the decrease, that first stitch got knitted. So now I'm going to wrap that back needle, the first needle on the back, and I'm going to lower this one, and I'm going to try not to break my needles. And so now what I'm going to end up with on the left is I've got 3 pieces of yarn on that one. So once I wrap this one, I'm going to have 3 pieces of yarn here. So now the heel is essentially complete. So I'm going to wrap, I'm not going to wrap, I'm going to knit. And 3 clicks past, and there's a reason why I do 3 clicks past. So now I'm going to lower the back half of the needles. And of course, we all know that when we lower or move our needles around, we got to check and make sure they're all open. And they are. Now, one of the things that I do that helps prevent drop stitches, because this is where you have the most weight on the machine, there's the most stress and pressure on that miter. This is where it all goes bad, right, ladies? If we drop stitches, it's the first few rounds. And what I found was I make sure that I pull the first 3 or 4 stitches up on the back half and on the front half of the machine so that the yarn clears the latches. I want to make sure that all the yarn is below the latch, right? And I have found that if you knit slowly on the first 5 rounds, after you get this done, of course I'm being picky about it today, that you are less likely to do that. And then I protect my miter when I do this. So what happens here, because I've got 3 pieces of yarn on the equivalent to needle, this is a 72 slot cylinder, on needle number 1 and on needle number 36. Yeah, on 36. And so I have 3 pieces on each one, and now I'm fixing to knit them off. I want to make sure they're all going to come off. And so I just push in when I get to the miter, and then I just watch what it does. And as it goes all the way down, I give it a little push right at the miter. And then I watch every stitch. And I do knit real slowly after my heel, the very first row, because I want to make sure every single one of them catches. And then on the second row, I can go a little bit quicker. And then I have 3rd row, 4th row, and then you're back into your regular knitting. So I'm going to knit this around just a little bit. And I'm going to pop this off. Yep, and I didn't put in ravel cord because I was a blonde this morning. Hey, it happens. Oh, good, I don't even have scissors with me. Yay me. But you don't have to have scissors. So, and I actually went past it a little bit, but I don't really care because this is just for demo purposes. But if I was taking it off the machine to do my normal thing. So I'm going to toss a little waste yarn on here, and we pass this around. And I know it doesn't seem like I showed you anything grand or spectacular, but the little things, and this will be straight off the machine with no lycra. Oops, sorry, I'm beating up the camera lady. Yeah, but I guess that's part of her job. Sorry, lady. I don't know what her name is. I just can only call her lady. And I have this little mini yarn bowl, and I just put my waste yarn in a ball, and I use it over and over again because, I can. And I took the heel weights off, so I pulled that one. Yes, I use a lot of waste yarn. And I do it for a reason, actually. Because if I break it or it frays, I can just cut that off and I can keep using it. I have more waste yarn that I know what to do with. Did somebody have a question? Oh, okay. So this isn't a hard thing to do. And, you know, you can take parts of this and like anchoring the sock to anchoring the heel to the body of the sock. You can do that with any heel. Um, you know, um, you know, the choice is yours. It's just all kinds of whatever. I'm gonna pass this around, and if anybody has any questions, and of course it's fresh off the machine, so it's gonna be a little loose, and it happens to be yarn that I knitted once before, so we all know how it looks like when it first comes off the machine. But if you saw the yes,
Do you ever do a DPL?
yeah, the DPL works the exact same way. You do the exact same thing. You just add 1, 2, 3, 4, as much as 4 needles, depending upon your cylinder, the foot that you're dealing with, or whatever. And so, you know, once that settles down, because we know when it first comes off the machine, and I don't even know what it's set at. I just packed it up and brought it. I was like, okay. But I typically, when I knit a sock, for stitch consistency, is I engage my heel spring after my first row, and I leave it on. If I'm doing a cuff down, I take the heel spring off for the last row of the foot before I start the toe.
Why?
I'm glad you asked, because that will cover in another class, which is a toe-up sock. But if you don't want to do a toe-up sock because you find that too fiddly, but you don't want a Kitchener, there's an alternate toe closure. If you look at the sock that's been passed around, you look at that toe and it's different, but it's still smooth and it lies flat against the toe. It is a crochet bind off without adding yarn, and so it stays and it's beautiful. And if you want to turn the sock inside out, and you will see, because the way I close it and then I can bind it off, I actually get to add a little bit of cushion to the toes by adding an extra strand of yarn, because I have this piece of yarn that comes off the machine. It's only about 8 inches. You kind of bind it through, you run it through your loose on the back side of it, and across the tip of the toe, back the other side, and I zigzag it through. So if anything ever happens, I have goof loop yarn built into the sock that I can take out later to make repairs. So, you know, but yeah.
So in order to tie the heel to the body,
Mm-hmm.
the only thing you did different is when you get started, just to wrap an extra up needle.
On the back, on each side, on the decrease and on the increase. And if you saw that one sock, the rainbow sock, there's no hole, there's nothing there.
You do the same thing on your toes.
Depends what kind of toe I do. If I do a toe up, yes, I do. If I do a cuff down, no, I do not. And the reason that I don't is, if you look at that sock that I passed around, you notice it has no dog ears. And it's nice and smooth. And you know that there's all kinds of extra yarn added all the way around that toe. You know, and but there's no dog ears, and so it sits and it lays flat, and it's smooth up against the toe. And if you don't believe me, go downstairs, see Melissa, say, take off your shoe, Cindy said, and and she will take off your shoe, because she's an amazing human being and she's wonderful, and she will show you just how nice and smooth that type of toe closure is, and how well she wears a woman's size 12 shoe. So she has a big foot and it's wide, and she has a wide heel. And that's her sock that y'all are holding. It's clean. I washed it, I promise. You know.
It's like, oh,
Yeah, I know. Oh, no. So, but no, it's actually really, it's the little things in the way that you use your machine that make all the difference in the world. Those little things that we've learned along the way that we forget to share with people. And so for me, doing a wrapped heel, when I first started, I did a 1 up, 2 down, 1 up, 2 down. I did it on the toes, I did it on the heels, I did it on everything. I didn't care. But I always anchored them. And I learned that when I used the little wood looms, you know, the little KB knitting looms, the little sock looms. That's how I learned how to make socks. I decided I wanted to learn how to knit. Well, I couldn't do it with needles. And I tried before. And I thought, I think that's these knitting looms now. This will be easy. It's just socks. Okay. I didn't know I picked the hardest thing to learn. But that was one of the things that they called it, was anchoring it to the body of the sock. And to me, it makes perfect sense because if you anchor it, because your heel is where there's the most stress on that sock. That's the largest part of the foot, is it over the foot, and you have the heel right there at that edge of the miter where the heel goes. It goes all the way around. That's the widest part of the sock, and that's where the most stress is always on. It's the most flexible portion. We abuse it putting our socks on and taking them off, and just in everyday wearing and walking. And I've been making socks for over a decade, whether it be on a CSM or on the little hand looms, one pick at a time. And I have yet to wear out a heel. And I've got one friend, and then I've been making socks for people forever, but one friend who's finally worn a hole at the bottom of the sock after 10 years, but not nothing where any of the miters have worn out because I always anchor everything. If you anchor it to, it gives it some support. That sounds silly, but it really does. Does anybody have any questions?
The only sock that I wore a hole in was Mary Maxon's sock.
Ah.
So you gotta watch your yarns.
But the most important thing about making this and doing this stuff is you find what works for you. Okay, you may not like doing a wrapped heel, but you might like the idea of anchoring the sock. Or, hey, I like the idea of pushing on the miter so I don't, because there's something about 9 o'clock to noon after you do the heel. That's your risk zone. That's at least it's always been for me. Might be something I'm doing in the way that I don't know. But whatever it is, that's my weak spot is right after the heel. And so those are the things that I've learned to do to help offset my things. And so if you get to your machine and you're struggling with something, you find what works for you, because, excuse me, what's right for me might not be right for you. And you might find, ooh, I like the idea of, strengthening the heel and closing that last little mini gap you got right there. And because we all have that mini gap, right? It's not really a hole, it's just a little bit of a gap. And that's how I close that gap. And it makes a nice sock and it washes and wear as well. Does anybody else have anything?
Thank you.
No, easy stuff. I don't know if this was even close to an hour, but
It's enough time.
okay. Well, I do have, if you guys want to learn an alternate toe closure and you downstairs and you knit a sock, and you've got your waist yarn on there and you haven't anchored it, please don't anchor it. Bring it over and I'll show you how to do the toe closure, an alternate toe closure with the crochet. You don't add any extra yarn, just add any extra bulk. And it gives, well, I think it's a really pretty little seam. And they seem to be very durable and I like them. And then if you decide you don't like it, that's okay. So.
If you have time, there's a question for you.
Yes.
See it in the, behind you.
Behind me? Okay. Oh, okay.
Does this get the same?
Yeah.
No, it actually gives a slightly different result. Can I have one of those socks back, ladies?
Yeah, somebody's
Yeah.
also asking online, like if you can show the
Yep.
signature.
Yep, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna show this stuff.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
okay. So with a 1 up, 2 down kind of deal, you get an every other kind of right here. I'm gonna try to open this up to show you. Is you see stitch, 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 stitch. Every one of them on both sides has the little ticks. It's a little tick sticks out there. See, there's one on this side, one on that side. When you do it 1 up, 2 down, you only get half of these, and so you end up with a little bit airier sock through here. It's still closed, but when you stretch it out, you can open it up and really see. And I've had 20 ladies in here stretching on this for the last 30 or 40 minutes, but you can see that it closes up beautifully. So it is a little, it produces the same type of heel, yes, but the seam looks different. So it's not like a tomato heel or the three wedge heel. And there's a lot of different heels to do out there, but So this just gets this really nice, neat seam, and it's nice and tidy. Here's the one we just did. Now it's just come off the machine and it's full of waste yarn, and it's re-knitted yarn at that. But you can see that really nice line right here. And on the inside, you can see this is where the wrap, this is what it looks like on the back side. And with the two down, you only get every other one of these. If that makes sense, they're just longer. So, do we have any other questions? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, and you know, don't if you need anything with anything at all, I'm down there. I can help anybody anytime. I'm happy to.